The scar that ran from Brenna Reeves's left temple down to her jaw had turned silver-white over the years, a permanent reminder of the night. Her father's barn went up in flames when she was 16. She caught her reflection in the general store window as she walked down the dusty main street of St. Louis, Missouri on a sweltering June morning in 1872, and quickly looked away, adjusting the bonnet that never quite covered enough of the damage. At 23, she had long accepted that marriage was not meant for women like her, women whose faces told stories that made decent men uncomfortable, and whose presence at church socials became something to be politely endured rather than celebrated. "Miss Reeves, you left your package," called Mrs. Henderson from the doorway of the mercantile, her voice pitched with that particular blend of pity and relief that Brenna knew all too well. The relief came from not having to prolong their interaction. The pity came from everyone knowing that Brenna lived alone in a small house at the edge of town, supporting herself by taking in sewing and mending, a spinster at an age when most women already had several children tugging at their skirts. "Thank you," Brenna said quietly, returning to collect the brown paper parcel. She kept her scarred side turned away, an automatic gesture that had become second nature. Mrs. Henderson's eyes still found it anyway, flicking toward the damaged side of Brenna's face before darting away. The June heat pressed down on the Mississippi River town like a heavy blanket, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Brenna hurried home, eager to escape the afternoon sun and the sideways glances that followed her everywhere. Her small clapboard house sat near the edge of the settlement, where the buildings gave way to open prairie, close enough to be respectable but far enough to be forgotten. It suited her perfectly. She had just settled into her work, needle flashing through the torn hem of a dress that belonged to Sarah Matthews, when she heard the commotion from town. Raised voices, the thunder of hooves, and then a series of sharp cracks that she recognized as gunfire. Brenna set down her sewing and moved to the window, her heart picking up speed. Violence was not uncommon in St. Louis, situated as it was at the western edge of civilization where river traffic met wagon trains heading toward the frontier. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. Brenna waited, barely breathing, until she heard boots on her front steps. The knock that followed was urgent, demanding. "I need help," came a male voice, rough with pain. Every instinct told Brenna to stay quiet, to pretend she was not home. A man seeking refuge after gunfire could mean nothing but trouble. But something in his voice, a thread of desperation that she recognized from her own dark moments, made her move toward the door. She opened it to find a man leaning heavily against the doorframe, his left hand pressed against his right shoulder where blood seeped between his fingers. He was tall, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of creek water, clear and green. His face was pale beneath several days of stubble, and his clothes marked him as a working cowboy, from his worn leather vest to the Colt revolver still holstered at his hip. "Please," he said, and his knees buckled. Brenna caught him by instinct, her arm going around his waist as she took his weight. He was heavy, all muscle and bone, and she staggered backward into her small front room. They made it to the settee before he collapsed, sprawling across the faded upholstery that Brenna had recovered herself just last winter. "I will get water and bandages," she said, already moving toward the kitchen. Her hands shook as she worked the pump, filling a basin. She grabbed clean rags from her sewing supplies and returned to find the stranger still conscious, his jaw clenched against the pain. "Name is Ethan Keller," he managed. "I am not a criminal. Those men were trying to rob the bank. I just got in the way." Brenna said nothing as she knelt beside him and carefully moved his hand away from the wound. The bullet had torn through the meaty part of his shoulder, leaving an ugly gash that bled freely. She had seen enough injuries growing up on a farm to know that this was serious but not immediately life-threatening if she could stop the bleeding and prevent infection. "This will hurt," she warned, and began to clean the wound. Ethan hissed through his teeth but did not pull away. His eyes found her face, and Brenna waited for the inevitable moment when he would see the scar and look away. Instead, his gaze remained steady, focused on her eyes rather than the damaged skin beside them. "Thank you," he said. "Most people would have turned me away." "Most people would have help arriving soon from town," Brenna replied, concentrating on her work. "You should be grateful I am not most people." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound and packing it with clean cloth before binding his shoulder tightly. Ethan's breathing had gone shallow by the time she finished, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the relative coolness of her house. "You should rest," Brenna said, standing and wiping her hands on a rag. "I will make willow bark tea for the pain." "Why are you helping me?" Ethan asked. His eyes had closed, but his voice remained clear. "You do not know me." Brenna paused in the doorway to her kitchen. No one should have to suffer alone. When she returned with the tea, Ethan had fallen into an uneasy sleep. Brenna set the cup on the side table and studied him in the afternoon light that filtered through her curtains. He had a good face, strong-featured and honest. His hands were calloused, marked by years of hard work. A working man, then, probably hired on with one of the cattle operations that were becoming more common as ranchers moved into Missouri from Texas. She turned away and went back to her sewing, trying to ignore the fact that there was a strange man sleeping in her front room and that half the town had probably heard the gunshots. Sure enough, as dusk began to fall, another knock came at her door. Sheriff Coleman stood on her steps, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss Reeves, we are looking for an injured man. Witnesses saw him headed this direction." Brenna did not hesitate. "He is here. He collapsed on my doorstep. Is he wanted for something?" The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Wanted? No, madam. That man is the reason the bank robbers did not get away with $10,000. He saw what was happening and intervened, got himself shot in the process. We have been trying to find him to thank him properly. The whole town is talking about it." Relief flooded through Brenna, though she could not have said why it mattered so much that Ethan was not a criminal. "He is sleeping. The wound is clean and I have bandaged it." "You did that?" Sheriff Coleman looked impressed. "That is fine work, Miss Reeves. Mind if I check on him?" Brenna stepped aside and the sheriff entered her small house. He looked down at Ethan's sleeping form and shook his head. "Foolish, brave boy. He just rode into town this morning looking for work at the Morrison Ranch. Instead, he ends up playing hero. Will you move him?" Brenna asked, surprised by the flash of disappointment she felt at the prospect. "Not tonight. Let him rest. If you are willing to keep caring for him, the town will compensate you for your trouble." The sheriff pulled out a small leather pouch and pressed it into her hands before she could protest. "It is the least we can do. That money in the bank represents the life savings of half the families in St. Louis. We owe this man a debt." After the sheriff left, Brenna opened the pouch to find more coins than she usually earned in 2 months of sewing. She set it on her mantle and returned to her vigil, checking Ethan's bandages and finding them still clean. His color had improved, and his breathing had deepened into genuine sleep, rather than unconsciousness. Night fell over St. Louis, and Brenna lit her lamps, settling into her chair with her mending. She found her eyes drifting to Ethan's face again and again, watching the play of lamplight across his features. It had been so long since she had been this close to a man, longer still since one had looked at her without visible discomfort. She reminded herself not to read anything into it. He had been in pain, desperate for help. Once he recovered and got a proper look at her in good light, he would have the same reaction everyone else did. She must have dozed off in her chair, because she woke to find pale dawn light creeping through her windows and Ethan watching her from the settee. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough but stronger than yesterday. "I apologize for taking over your house." Brenna sat up quickly, smoothing her skirts and feeling her face heat with embarrassment. She had slept in her chair like some old grandmother, and her hair had come loose from its pins. "How are you feeling?" "Like I have been shot," Ethan replied, and there was a hint of humor in his tone. "But better than I might have. You have skilled hands. I grew up on a farm." "You learned to deal with injuries." Brenna stood and moved toward the kitchen, keeping her scarred side turned away. "I will make breakfast." "Miss Reeves," Ethan said, and something in his voice made her pause. "Will you not let me see your face?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. Most people pretended not to notice her careful positioning, her strategic use of bonnets and turned shoulders. "You can see my face. Only half of it. You keep turning away." Brenna's hands clenched at her sides. "I have a scar. People find it unsettling. May I be the judge of that?" The quiet request hung in the air between them. Brenna found herself turning slowly, fully facing him for the first time. The morning light was unforgiving, illuminating every detail of the damage the fire had done. The scar tissue pulled at her left eye slightly, giving her face an asymmetrical cast, and the line itself was thick and ropey, impossible to ignore. Ethan looked at her steadily, his green eyes moving over her face with careful attention. Then he said, "You have kind eyes, the color of good earth. And your hands are gentle. Those are the things I notice." Brenna's throat tightened. "You do not need to be kind. I am not being kind. I am being honest." Ethan tried to sit up and winced, his hand going to his bandaged shoulder. "Though I will admit that pain might be making me more forthright than usual." "Stay still," Brenna ordered, moving to his side. She checked his bandages and was relieved to find them still clean and dry. "The wound is not infected, but you need to rest. Moving around will only tear it open again." "Yes, madam," Ethan said meekly, but there was a glint of something in his eyes that might have been amusement. Over the next week, an unexpected routine developed. Brenna tended to Ethan's wound twice daily, and slowly he regained his strength. The town sent over food and supplies, a steady stream of gratitude for the man who had saved their money. Visitors came by as well, ranchers and businessmen eager to offer Ethan work once he recovered. The Morrison Ranch wanted him, as did the Thompson outfit, and even the Carlisle spread, which was the largest operation in 3 counties. Ethan accepted their thanks with quiet grace, but made no commitments, which Brenna found curious. "They are offering good wages," she said one afternoon as she changed his bandages. The wound was healing cleanly, already beginning to knit together. "Most cowboys would jump at the chance to work for Carlisle." "Most cowboys have not just been shot," Ethan replied. He was sitting up now, bare-chested while she worked, and Brenna tried not to notice the planes of muscle across his stomach, the way his skin was tanned from years of outdoor work. Makes a man reconsider what is important. "And what is important?" Brenna asked, winding fresh cloth around his shoulder. Not getting shot again would be a good start. Ethan caught her hand as she secured the bandage, his fingers warm against hers. "Also, I have been thinking that I like St. Louis. The company here is particularly good." Brenna pulled her hand away, her heart hammering. "You should not say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it is not true. You are grateful, that is all. Once you are healed and back to your life, you will forget all about the scarred woman who bandaged you up." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You think very little of me if you believe I am that shallow." "I think nothing of you at all." Brenna said, but the lie was obvious even to her own ears. The truth was that she had thought of little else but Ethan Keller for the past week. The sound of his voice, the way he smiled at her stories about growing up on the farm, the careful way he never looked at her with pity. It terrified her, this growing attachment to a man who would inevitably move on. "Then let me prove you wrong," Ethan said quietly. Before Brenna could ask what he meant, another knock came at the door. This time it was a young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, with blonde curls and a pretty, heart-shaped face. She carried a basket covered with a checked cloth. "I am looking for Ethan Keller," she announced, her blue eyes bright with curiosity. "I am Caroline Harper. My father owns the mercantile, and I have brought him some of my special honey cakes. Is he here?" Brenna felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was what she had known would happen. Young, pretty girls like Caroline Harper would come calling, and Ethan would realize what his options were. "He is resting. I will give him your basket." "Oh, I had hoped to thank him personally." Caroline craned her neck, trying to see past Brenna into the house. "They say he is terribly brave." "Is it true he faced down 3 armed robbers?" "2. Ethan's voice came from inside. "And I mostly just got in the way." Caroline's face lit up. "May I come in?" Brenna wanted to say no, to close the door on this girl's eager face, but she had no right. She stepped aside and let Caroline enter, watching as the young woman bustled over to Ethan with her basket. "Mr. Keller, you are a hero," Caroline gushed. "Everyone is talking about how you saved the bank. My father said that if you ever need anything from the mercantile, it is yours for free. Are you feeling better? That looks like a terrible wound." "It is healing well, thanks to Miss Reeves," Ethan said, and his eyes found Brenna's across the room. Caroline barely glanced at Brenna. How lucky that she was here to help. "But now that you are recovering, you must let us take care of you. My mother would love to have you to dinner once you are well enough. She makes the most wonderful roast chicken." Brenna turned away, returning to her kitchen on the pretense of preparing lunch. She could hear Caroline's bright chatter continuing, punctuated by Ethan's quieter responses. The contrast between Caroline's easy confidence and her own careful isolation had never been more obvious. This was the world Ethan belonged to, full of pretty girls and dinner invitations and normal social interactions that did not require carefully managed angles and strategic lighting. After Caroline finally left, pressing Ethan to promise he would visit once he was recovered, silence filled the small house. Brenna kept herself busy in the kitchen, preparing a simple lunch of bread and cheese. "You do not like her," Ethan said when she brought him a plate. "I do not know her well enough to like or dislike her." Brenna set the plate down with more force than necessary. "She invited me to dinner. I heard. Her mother makes wonderful roast chicken." "Brenna." Ethan caught her wrist, holding her in place when she would have turned away. "Look at me." She did, reluctantly. His green eyes were serious, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "I am not interested in Caroline Harper or her mother's roast chicken," he said clearly. "I am interested in you. That is foolish. Maybe, but it is also true." He released her wrist and picked up the bread, tearing off a piece. "You are the most interesting woman I have ever met. You are skilled and practical, and you do not simper. You saved my life, and you did not ask for anything in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Any decent person would have done the same. But they did not. You did." Ethan took a bite of bread and chewed thoughtfully. "Tell me about the fire, the one that gave you the scar." Brenna sank into the chair across from him, caught off guard by the direct question. No one ever asked about the fire. They might speculate or gossip, but no one asked her directly. "It happened 7 years ago. I was 16. My father's barn caught fire in the middle of the night. We do not know how it started. I ran inside to get the horses out and a beam fell. You ran into a burning building to save animals. They would have burned alive. Brenna touched her scar unconsciously. I got the horses out, but I did not move fast enough to avoid the beam. It caught me across the face and pinned me for a moment. My father pulled me free. You were brave. I was stupid, and now I wear the proof of it on my face for the rest of my life. Brenna stood abruptly. The scar frightens children. It makes men uncomfortable. I am used to it now, but that does not mean I enjoy subjecting others to it. It does not frighten me, Ethan said. And I am not uncomfortable. I see a woman who risked her life to save innocent creatures. That is not something to be ashamed of. Brenna wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being wanted to accept his words at face value. But she had been disappointed too many times, had seen too many men's expressions change from polite interest to barely concealed revulsion when they got a good look at her face in full light. You should rest, she said, instead of voicing any of these thoughts. The more you sleep, the faster you will heal. Over the next few days, Ethan grew stronger. He could sit up without wincing, could stand and walk around the small house without growing dizzy. Soon he would be well enough to leave, to take one of the many job offers that had been extended to him. Brenna tried to prepare herself for his departure, but she found herself growing quieter as his health improved, withdrawing into herself. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed to notice everything about her. "You are pulling away," he said one evening as they sat in her front room. Brenna was sewing by lamplight, and Ethan was supposedly reading a newspaper that someone had brought by, but she could feel his eyes on her. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You barely speak to me anymore. You will not look at me. Every time I try to have a conversation, you find an excuse to leave the room." Brenna set down her sewing. "You are well now. You will be leaving soon. It seems wise to re-establish proper boundaries." Proper boundaries. Ethan set aside his newspaper and leaned forward. "Is that what you call shutting me out? I call it being realistic. You have your life to return to, and I have mine. This has been an unusual circumstance, but it is ending. That is how these things work. What if I do not want it to end?" The quiet words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Brenna felt her heart clench, hope and fear warring inside her chest. "Ethan, please do not." "Do not what? Tell you the truth." He stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so that they were at eye level. "I have spent the last 2 weeks getting to know you, Brenna Reeves. I know that you hum while you cook, that you are terrible at cards but too stubborn to admit it, that you care for stray cats but pretend you do not. I know that you are lonely, even though you try to hide it. And I know that you think no man could possibly want you because of a scar that you see as a disfigurement, but that I see as a mark of courage. You do not understand," Brenna whispered. "You have not seen how people look at me, how they pity me or avoid me. How mothers pull their children away when I walk past. I have accepted my place in this town, and it is not as someone's wife. Then maybe you need a new town." Ethan reached up and gently turned her face toward him, his fingers warm against her jaw. "Or maybe you just need someone who sees you clearly." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, when she found herself frozen between terror and longing, his lips brushed against hers. The kiss was soft, questioning, and Brenna felt something break open inside her chest. When was the last time someone had touched her with tenderness? When had anyone last looked at her with desire rather than pity? She kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. The kiss deepened, and Brenna allowed herself to fall into it, to believe for just this moment that maybe Ethan Keller meant what he said. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I am taking the job at the Morrison Ranch. It is only 3 miles outside of town. I can ride in to see you every day." "Why would you do that?" Brenna asked, though her heart was singing. "Because I am going to court you properly, with flowers and Sunday dinners and walks along the river. I am going to prove to you that I mean every word I have said, and then, if you will have me, I am going to marry you." Brenna pulled back to stare at him. "You are talking nonsense. You have only known me for 2 weeks. I have known you long enough to recognize something rare when I see it. I spent 5 years drifting from ranch to ranch, never finding a place that felt like home. Then I got shot and ended up on your doorstep, and for the first time in my life, I did not want to leave." Ethan stood, pulling her up with him. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am asking you to give me a chance to prove myself. Let me court you." Every rational part of Brenna's mind screamed that this was a mistake, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak. But there was a louder voice, one that had been silent for years, that whispered maybe. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe Ethan Keller was exactly who he appeared to be. "1 month," she heard herself say. "Court me for 1 month and then we will see." The smile that broke across Ethan's face was like sunrise. 1 month, I can work with that." The next morning, Ethan left for the Morrison Ranch. True to his word, he appeared at Brenna's door the following evening, freshly washed and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers that he must have picked on his ride into town. "For you," he said, presenting them with a slight bow that made Brenna laugh despite herself. "They are lovely. Come in." Brenna had spent the afternoon cooking, something she rarely did with such care anymore. There seemed little point in elaborate meals when you ate alone every night. But today she had made chicken and dumplings, biscuits, and even a dried apple pie. The house smelled wonderful, and she had taken extra care with her appearance, wearing her best dress and pinning her hair carefully. Ethan noticed immediately. "You look beautiful," he said, and there was such sincerity in his voice that Brenna felt heat rise in her cheeks. They ate together, talking about Ethan's first day at the Morrison Ranch. He had been given a room in the bunkhouse and assigned to work with the horses, which suited him perfectly. "Morrison has good stock," Ethan explained. "They are building a breeding program trying to develop horses that can handle the Missouri heat and winters both. It is interesting work." "Better than getting shot at by bank robbers?" Brenna asked, passing him another biscuit. "Considerably better." Ethan grinned at her. "Though I do not regret how that turned out." After dinner, they sat on Brenna's small front porch, watching the sun set over the prairie. The evening air was soft, carrying the scent of grass and distant water from the Mississippi. Ethan told her stories about his childhood in Illinois, about the farm where he had grown up and the restlessness that had driven him west. "My father wanted me to take over the farm," Ethan said, "but I could not see myself spending my whole life in one place, doing the same things year after year. I needed to move to see what else was out there. So when I turned 18, I hired on with a cattle drive heading to Texas. I have been working my way back north ever since." "Do you regret leaving?" Brenna asked. "Sometimes. My parents are gone now, both passed a few years back. I have a sister in Springfield, but we do not see each other often. It can be lonely, the drifting life. You meet people and move on before you can really know them." He turned to look at her. "But I am tired of moving, Brenna. I am ready to settle down to build something that lasts." The intensity in his gaze made Brenna's breath catch. "You barely know me. Then help me know you better. Tell me something real." Brenna thought about all the things she could say, all the safe, surface-level stories she could share. Instead, she found herself telling him the truth. "After the fire, when the doctor finally let me see my face in a mirror, I wish the beam had killed me. It sounds dramatic now, but I was 16 and my whole future seemed ruined. I spent months barely leaving the house, terrified of what people would say. And then my mother died, sudden-like, from a bad heart. My father just closed in on himself after that, stopped caring about the farm or me or anything. He died the next winter and I was alone. How did you survive? Ethan asked quietly. Sewing, mostly. I could do the work at home, and people were willing to pay well for someone with steady hands. I saved enough to buy this house, and I built a life. It is not the life I imagined when I was a girl, but it is mine. I answer to no one, and no one pities me to my face at least. She paused. Until you showed up and started talking about courting and marriage and futures that I stopped believing in years ago. Ethan reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I cannot change what happened to you, but I can promise you that I am not going anywhere. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I will prove to you that you are worth wanting. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely, and Brenna allowed herself to hope. True to his word, Ethan appeared at her door nearly every evening. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a pretty stone from the river or a book he thought she might enjoy. Sometimes he just brought himself and stories from the ranch. He made her laugh with tales of the Morrison ranch hands and their various mishaps, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her sewing projects or the small dramas of her neighbors. On Sundays, they attended church together, and Brenna noticed the stares and whispers that followed them. She waited for Ethan to become uncomfortable, to start making excuses not to be seen with her in public. Instead, he kept his hand firmly on her elbow, nodding politely to anyone who greeted them and ignoring the gossipers entirely. After church one Sunday, Caroline Harper approached them, her pretty face tight with confusion. "Mr. Keller, I thought you were going to call on us. Mother has been expecting you." "I apologize for any misunderstanding, Miss Harper, but I am courting Miss Reeves," Ethan said clearly, loud enough that several nearby conversations stopped. "I have been from the beginning." Caroline's eyes widened, and she looked between Ethan and Brenna with obvious bewilderment. "But I thought, everyone said that you were just staying with her while you recovered." Everyone was wrong. Ethan smiled down at Brenna. "Miss Reeves and I are walking out together." "I hope that clears things up." The gossip that followed them through town after that was intense but short-lived. People quickly grew accustomed to seeing Ethan and Brenna together, and if some still whispered about the cowboy who was courting the scarred seamstress, most seemed to accept it as simply another oddity of frontier life. 3 weeks into their courtship, Ethan took Brenna on a picnic beside the Mississippi River. They rode out from town on a horse he borrowed from the ranch, Brenna seated side saddle in front of him, hyper-aware of his arms around her and the solid warmth of his chest against her back. The spot he had chosen was beautiful, a grassy bank shaded by cottonwood trees where the river ran slow and smooth. Brenna spread out the quilt she had brought while Ethan unpacked the basket of food. They ate fried chicken and potato salad, fresh bread and cherry preserves, and Brenna felt a contentment she had not experienced in years. "This is perfect," she said, lying back on the quilt to watch the leaves move overhead. "Thank you for bringing me here." Ethan stretched out beside her, propped on one elbow so he could look down at her face. "I wanted to spend time with you away from town, away from all the watching eyes and whispers." "The whispers do not bother you?" Brenna asked. "Not even a little. Let them talk. They will find something new to gossip about soon enough." Ethan reached out and traced the line of her scar with gentle fingers. "Does it still hurt?" "Not anymore. Sometimes it itches when the weather changes, but mostly I forget it is there." She caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. until I see someone's reaction. Then stop looking at their reactions. Look at mine instead." Ethan leaned down and kissed the scar, a soft brush of lips that made Brenna's breath catch. "I see a beautiful, brave woman. I see the person I want to spend my life with." "It has only been 3 weeks," Brenna protested weakly. "And I have known my mind since the first week, but I am a patient man. I said I would prove myself, and I will." He kissed her mouth then, slow and deep, and Brenna felt herself melting into him. His hand slid into her hair, careful not to disturb the pins, and she pressed closer, wanting to memorize every detail of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Brenna Reeves. I know it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you try to hide how much you care about things. I love your hands and your voice and, yes, even your scar, because it is part of you. And I want you to know that even if you never love me back, I will not regret a single moment of this time together." Tears spilled down Brenna's cheeks, and she found herself laughing and crying at the same time. "You are the most infuriating man I have ever met." "Is that a yes?" Ethan asked hopefully. "It is, and I think I might be falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me." Brenna cupped his face in her hands. "I do not know how to do this, Ethan. I do not know how to trust that this is real." "Then let me show you. Every single day I will show you." He kissed her again, and this time Brenna let herself believe it. They returned to town as the sun was setting, and Ethan walked Brenna to her door. "I need to tell you something," he said, suddenly serious. "Morrison offered me a permanent position today. Not just ranch hand, but foreman. It means better pay, a house instead of a bunkhouse, real roots." "Ethan, that is wonderful," Brenna said. "You should take it." "I told him I needed to talk to you first." Ethan took both her hands in his. "The house is big enough for a family. I know it has only been 3 weeks, but Brenna, I do not want to wait. Marry me." "Not someday. Not when we have courted for the proper amount of time. Marry me now, and we will build our life together." Brenna's heart hammered in her chest. Every practical instinct told her to say no, to insist they wait, to protect herself from potential heartbreak. But when she looked into Ethan's green eyes and saw nothing but love and certainty, she found herself nodding. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Ethan let out a whoop of joy and swept her up, spinning her around on her front porch. "You mean it? You are sure?" "I am terrified and completely unsure, but yes, I mean it." Brenna was laughing now, caught up in his enthusiasm. "When?" "As soon as possible. Next week if the preacher is available." Ethan set her down and kissed her soundly. "I will talk to Morrison tomorrow, accept the job, and start getting the house ready. You will love it, Brenna. It has a real kitchen and a bedroom and a porch that looks out over the prettiest meadow you have ever seen." They spent the next hour making plans, their voices overlapping with excitement. Brenna would continue her sewing work from the new house, and Ethan would bring home his earnings as foreman. They would have a small wedding, just a few witnesses at the church. Brenna had no family to invite, and Ethan's only family was his sister in Springfield, who could not be reached in time. "I do not need a big wedding," Brenna said. "I just need you." The next morning, Ethan went to the Morrison ranch while Brenna dealt with the more practical aspects of getting married. She visited the preacher and arranged for the ceremony to take place the following Saturday. She went to the Mercantile, where Mrs. Henderson could barely hide her shock at the news. Word spread quickly through town, and by afternoon, several women had stopped by Brenna's house under the pretense of offering congratulations, but really to verify the gossip. "Are you certain about this, dear?" asked Mrs. Watson, one of the church ladies who had always been kind to Brenna in a distant sort of way. "You have only known Mr. Keller for such a short time." "I am certain," Brenna said firmly. "He is a good man and I love him. After the visitors finally left, Brenna sat in her small house and looked around at the life she had built. It would be strange to leave it, this space that had been hers and hers alone for so long. But the thought of sharing a home with Ethan, of building something together, filled her with a joy she had almost forgotten was possible. The week passed in a blur of preparations. Ethan came by every evening, his face alight with plans and possibilities. He described the foreman's house in detail, and Brenna could see it taking shape in her mind. She packed her belongings carefully, sorting through years of accumulated possessions and deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Ethan appeared at her door with a small velvet box. "I know we are doing this quickly, and I know you did not get a proper proposal, but I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman I loved." Brenna's eyes filled with tears. The ring was beautiful, delicate, and old-fashioned. "It is perfect. So are you." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit as though it had been made for her. "Tomorrow you become my wife. I still cannot quite believe it. Neither can I." Brenna looked down at the ring, watching it catch the lamplight. "Ethan, there is something I need to say. I know I have been difficult about this, that I have fought against believing you. But I want you to know that I do trust you. I trust your word and your intentions and your love, and I am going into this marriage with my whole heart." Ethan pulled her close, and they stood together in her small front room, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow, their new life would begin, but tonight they savored the ending of their old ones. The wedding took place at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Brenna wore a simple blue dress that brought out the brown in her eyes, and she had spent extra time on her hair, arranging it in soft waves around her face. She did not try to hide her scar. When she looked in the mirror before leaving for the church, she saw what Ethan saw, a woman who had survived and endured and was now choosing to live fully. The church was small but filled with more people than Brenna had expected. Ranch hands from the Morrison spread had come, along with several townspeople and the sheriff who had given Ethan a slap on the back and a hearty congratulations. Caroline Harper was notably absent, but her parents were there, offering stiff but genuine well wishes. Ethan stood at the front of the church wearing his best clothes, his dark hair neatly combed. When Brenna walked down the aisle alone, having no one to give her away, his face lit up with such joy that she felt her own answering smile. The ceremony was brief. Reverend Thompson spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together on faith and trust. Brenna barely heard the words, too focused on Ethan's hands holding hers, on the intensity of his gaze as he promised to love and cherish her for as long as they both lived. When it came time for her vows, Brenna's voice was steady. "I promise to love you, to trust you, and to build a life with you. I promise to be your partner in all things, in good times and in difficult ones. And I promise to believe, every single day, that I am worthy of the love you give me." "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thompson said, and Ethan did not need to be told twice. He pulled Brenna close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and laughter of their witnesses. They emerged from the church into bright June sunshine, officially man and wife. The Morrison Ranch hands threw rice, and Brenna laughed as it caught in her hair and the folds of her dress. Ethan helped her onto his horse, and they rode out of town toward their new home, waving at the people who had gathered to see them off. The foreman's house sat on a rise overlooking a meadow dotted with wildflowers. It was larger than Brenna's old house, built of solid timber with a wide front porch and real glass windows. Ethan had been busy, she saw. The porch had been swept clean and smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting a fire already laid. "It is beautiful," Brenna breathed. Ethan dismounted and helped her down. "Wait until you see inside." He had prepared everything. The main room held a table and chairs, a comfortable settee positioned near the fireplace, and shelves already waiting for Brenna's belongings. The kitchen was larger than her old one, with a good stove and plenty of counter space. But it was the bedroom that made Brenna catch her breath. A large bed dominated the space, covered in a beautiful quilt that Brenna recognized as the work of Sally Morrison, the rancher's wife. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, and someone had filled a vase with wildflowers that sat on the dresser. "Sally helped me get it ready," Ethan admitted. "I did not want you to have to set up house on your wedding day." Brenna turned to him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "You did all this for me. I would do anything for you." Ethan crossed to her and took her hands. "Brenna, I know this has all happened so fast. But I need you to understand something. I am not going to wake up one day and change my mind. I am not going to decide that your scar matters or that I made a mistake. You are stuck with me for better or worse until the day I die." "Promise," Brenna whispered. "I promise." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Brenna felt the last of her doubts melt away. This was real. This man loved her, scars and all, and she loved him back with an intensity that still surprised her. They had the rest of their lives to build on this foundation. But for now, they had each other and this beautiful house and a future full of possibilities. That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Brenna traced the scar on Ethan's shoulder where the bullet had torn through. It had healed well, leaving a puckered mark that would fade with time but never disappear completely. "We match now," she said softly. "Both scarred, both survivors," Ethan corrected, pulling her closer. "And both exactly where we are supposed to be." The summer passed in a haze of happiness. Brenna settled into her new role as the foreman's wife, and she found that she liked the rhythm of ranch life. She kept the house, tended a garden that she planted in the rich soil behind the house, and continued her sewing work, which now included mending for the ranch hands as well as her regular customers from town. Ethan thrived in his new position. He had a natural way with horses and men both, and the Morrison Ranch prospered under his management. He came home each evening full of stories and plans, and Brenna loved listening to his deep voice as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the meadow. They made friends among the other ranch families, and Brenna was surprised to find herself invited to quilting bees and church socials. Sally Morrison took her under her wing, a motherly woman who seemed genuinely pleased to have another educated woman on the ranch. Through Sally, Brenna met the other wives and girlfriends, and slowly she built a social circle that had been lacking in her old life. "You are different now," Sally observed one afternoon as they worked together on a quilt. "Happier." "I am," Brenna admitted. "I did not realize how much I had been just existing before. Now I feel like I am actually living. Ethan is good for you, and you are good for him. That man was drifting before he met you, anyone could see it. Now he has purpose." As fall approached, Brenna began to suspect she was pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Ethan, but when her courses failed to come for the second month in a row, she knew. She planned to tell him over dinner, but her excitement got the better of her, and the words tumbled out the moment he walked in the door. "I am going to have a baby." Ethan froze, his hat still in his hands. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor, but all the signs are there." A grin spread across Ethan's face, and he let out a whoop that probably carried all the way to the main ranch house. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and swept her up, spinning her around the way he had on the night of their engagement. "We are having a baby," he said wonderingly. "Brenna, this is the best news." I am glad you think so, Brenna laughed, clinging to his shoulders. Put me down before you make me dizzy. He set her down carefully, and his hands went immediately to her still flat stomach. When? Spring, I think. Late April or early May. Brenna covered his hands with hers. Are you happy? Happy does not begin to cover it. Ethan dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach. Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I promise to take good care of you and your mother. Brenna laughed through her tears, running her fingers through Ethan's dark hair. This was more than she had ever dreamed possible. A husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and now a child on the way. Sometimes she woke in the night and had to remind herself that it was all real, that she had not imagined the past few months. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Brenna felt tired and occasionally queasy, but nothing that interfered with her daily life. Ethan became even more protective than usual, insisting she rest frequently and refusing to let her lift anything heavy. Sally Morrison and the other ranch wives surrounded her with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, and Brenna found herself part of a community in a way she had never experienced before. Winter came early that year, with snow falling in November and temperatures dropping well below freezing. Brenna spent more time indoors, sewing tiny gowns and knitting soft blankets. Ethan made sure the house was warm and well stocked with firewood, and on cold evenings they sat together by the fire, planning for the baby's arrival. What should we name him? Ethan asked one night, his hand resting on Brenna's swelling belly. Or her, Brenna corrected. We do not know yet. Either way, we need names. What do you like? They debated various options, rejecting some and considering others. Finally, they settled on Samuel for a boy and Emma for a girl, names that felt solid and traditional without being too common. Christmas came and went, a quiet celebration marked by their first holiday as a married couple. Ethan carved Brenna a beautiful wooden rocking chair for the baby, and she knitted him a warm scarf in dark green wool that matched his eyes. They attended Christmas service at the church in town, and Brenna noticed how different it felt from previous years. Instead of sitting alone in the back, she sat beside her husband in the middle of the congregation, accepted and included. As winter gave way to early spring, Brenna grew larger and more uncomfortable. Her back ached, and she could not find a comfortable sleeping position. Ethan was endlessly patient, adjusting pillows and rubbing her sore muscles without complaint. I am enormous, Brenna complained one evening in late March, looking down at her distended belly. I cannot imagine getting any bigger. You are beautiful, Ethan said firmly. You are carrying our child. That makes you the most beautiful woman in the world. You are required to say that. You are my husband. I am saying it because it is true. Ethan knelt before her and pressed a kiss to her belly. Both of you are perfect. The baby came on a warm night in late April, 3 weeks earlier than they had expected. Brenna woke Ethan at midnight with the news that her pains had started, and he immediately rode to fetch Sally Morrison and the midwife from town. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, long hours of pain that tested Brenna's strength. Sally stayed with her the entire time, offering encouragement and cool cloths for her forehead. Ethan paced outside, occasionally allowed in to hold Brenna's hand between contractions. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Brenna wondered if she had the strength to continue, but Sally assured her she was close. Finally, as noon approached, the baby emerged with a lusty cry. It is a boy, the midwife announced, holding up the squalling infant, and he is perfect. They placed Samuel Keller on Brenna's chest, and she looked down at her son in wonder. He was red-faced and angry, with a shock of dark hair like his father's. His eyes, when they briefly opened, were the blue of all newborns, and his tiny fists waved in protest at being thrust into the cold world. "Hello, Samuel," Brenna whispered, touching his soft cheek. "I am your mother." Ethan was allowed in once the midwife had cleaned up. He approached the bed cautiously, his eyes wide with awe. "Is he all right? Are you all right? We are both perfect." Brenna shifted the baby so Ethan could see him better. "Say hello to your son." Ethan reached out with one finger and stroked Samuel's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his father's, and Ethan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is so small and so perfect." "Brenna, look what we made." "I know." Brenna was crying too, overwhelmed by love and exhaustion and joy. Over the next weeks, they settled into the chaotic rhythm of life with a newborn. Samuel proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention at all hours. Brenna was constantly feeding him or changing him or trying to soothe him to sleep. Ethan helped as much as he could, walking the floor with Samuel when Brenna needed to sleep, and making sure she ate properly. "I had no idea babies required so much work," Ethan said one night, rocking Samuel in his arms while Brenna ate a hasty dinner. "How does anyone survive this?" "You take it one day at a time," Sally Morrison said. She had stopped by with a casserole, as she did several times a week. "And you accept help when it is offered." "We appreciate everything you have done," Brenna said. "I do not know how we would have managed without you." "Nonsense. This is what neighbors do. Besides, I remember what it was like with my first. Having another woman to talk to made all the difference." As spring turned to summer, life gradually became easier. Samuel settled into a more predictable schedule, and Brenna regained her strength. She loved motherhood, she discovered, loved the weight of her baby in her arms and the sweet smell of his head. She loved watching Ethan with Samuel, seeing the gentle way he handled their son and the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. One evening in June, when Samuel was 2 months old, Brenna sat on the porch with her son in her arms, watching Ethan work with a new horse in the corral. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and a warm breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the meadow. Ethan finished his work and came to join her, sitting on the porch steps and leaning back against the railing. Samuel had fallen asleep, and Brenna transferred him to his father's arms without waking him. "You ever think about that day in June last year?" Brenna asked. "When you got shot and ended up on my doorstep?" "All the time," Ethan replied, looking down at his sleeping son. "Best day of my life, getting shot. Not a sentence I ever thought I would say, but it is true. I was so convinced that no man could want me, that I would spend the rest of my life alone." Brenna touched her scar, a gesture that had become less frequent over the past year. "You proved me wrong." "Not wrong, just afraid." Ethan looked at her over Samuel's sleeping form. "You needed someone who could see past the scar to the woman underneath. I am just grateful I was the one who got that chance." "Every day," Brenna said softly. "Every single day since we met, you have shown me that I am worthy of love, that the scar does not define me. I do not think I will ever be able to properly thank you for that gift." "You do not need to thank me. You gave me the same gift. Before I met you, I was just drifting, no purpose, no home." "You gave me both," Ethan smiled. "And now we have this perfect boy and this beautiful life. I would say we are even." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. One small family in the vast expanse of Missouri prairie. Content in the knowledge that they had found what so many spent their whole lives searching for, a place to belong and a love that would last. The years that followed were full and happy. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's green eyes and his mother's serious nature. When he was 2, Brenna discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her ability to handle whatever came. Their daughter Emma was born in the spring of 1875. A tiny, delicate baby who looked like a miniature version of Brenna. Scar accepted. Ethan proved to be a wonderful father, patient with Samuel's endless questions, and tender with Emma's infant needs. He taught Samuel to ride when the boy was barely 4, setting him on a gentle mare and walking beside them around the corral. Brenna watched from the porch, Emma on her hip, and marveled at how completely her life had changed. The Morrison Ranch continued to prosper, and Ethan's reputation as a skilled foreman spread throughout the county. Other ranchers tried to lure him away with promises of higher wages and better positions, but Ethan always refused. "I have everything I need right here," he told Brenna. "Why would I uproot our family for a few extra dollars?" Brenna's sewing business evolved as well. She took on fewer regular mending jobs and began creating custom dresses for the wealthy ladies in St. Louis proper. Her work was exquisite, and she commanded good prices. The extra income allowed them to buy a few head of their own cattle, the beginning of a herd that they hoped would eventually allow them to start their own ranch. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Brenna with a gift. He led her to the barn where a beautiful chestnut mare stood waiting, a ribbon tied around her neck. "She is yours," Ethan said. "I know you ride the ranch horses when you need to go to town, but I wanted you to have one of your own. Her name is Copper." Brenna approached the mare slowly, running her hand down the sleek neck. Copper nuzzled her palm, gentle and curious. "She is beautiful, but Ethan, we cannot afford this." "Actually, we can. Morrison gave her to me as a bonus, said I had earned it 3 times over. I want you to have her. Besides, I have been thinking we should teach the children to ride properly, and they will need a calm horse to learn on." They rode out that evening, leaving the children with Sally Morrison. They followed the river, riding side by side as the sun set over the water. It felt like their courting days, that precious time when they were first learning each other, except now they had years of shared history and the bone-deep knowledge of being truly known. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked as they walked the horses along the riverbank. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Brenna replied honestly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I have you and the children and this beautiful home. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Ethan assured her, "and it is ours. We built this together, Brenna." They dismounted near the spot where they had picnicked during their courtship, and Ethan spread out a blanket he had tucked in his saddlebag. They sat together watching the stars emerge, Brenna leaning back against Ethan's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "You ever regret it?" Brenna asked. "Settling down so young. You were only 25 when we married. You could have had years more of freedom." "Not for a single second. Freedom is overrated when you spend it alone." Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Besides, I have had more adventure in the last 5 years than in all my drifting days combined. Fatherhood is the greatest adventure of all, even when Samuel put that frog in your boot, especially then." Ethan laughed. "That boy is too clever for his own good. Wonder where he gets that from." "Definitely his father." They rode home under the stars, and Brenna thought about how far she had come from that frightened, scarred girl who thought herself unworthy of love. Ethan had not just proven her wrong. He had shown her daily, through word and deed and unwavering devotion, that she was cherished exactly as she was. When Samuel was 7 and Emma 5, Brenna became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her exhausted and ill. The midwife warned that she was older now, 30 years old, and that this birth might be more difficult. Ethan worried constantly, hovering over her and insisting she rest. "I am fine," Brenna assured him, though privately she shared his concerns. Women have babies all the time. Not my woman, not my wife. If anything happened to you, I would not survive it. Nothing is going to happen to me. I am strong, remember. I ran into a burning barn when I was 16. I can handle having a baby. But when her time came that winter, it was indeed difficult. The labor lasted nearly 24 hours, and there were moments when even the experienced midwife looked worried. Ethan refused to leave Brenna's side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she screamed with pain. Finally, just as dawn broke over the frozen prairie, their second son entered the world. He was smaller than Samuel had been, but his cries were strong and healthy. They named him Thomas, after Ethan's father. The recovery was slow. Brenna developed a fever that lasted for days, and for a frightening week, Ethan truly feared he might lose her. Sally Morrison moved into the house to care for the children and help the midwife tend to Brenna. Ethan barely slept, spending every possible moment at his wife's side. When Brenna's fever finally broke, Ethan wept with relief. "Never again," he said hoarsely. "We have 3 beautiful children. That is enough." "Agreed," Brenna whispered, still weak. "I do not think I could survive another." As she regained her strength, Brenna came to love little Thomas as fiercely as she loved her other children. He was a quieter baby than Samuel had been, more content to simply observe the world around him. Emma was delighted to have a real baby to fuss over, treating Thomas like her own living doll. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of childhood. Samuel grew tall and serious, already showing signs of his father's way with horses. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions and demanding stories. Thomas remained quiet, but his eyes missed nothing, and he had a gift for drawing that amazed everyone. Brenna's face became a familiar sight in town, and eventually people stopped noticing the scar at all. She was simply Mrs. Keller, the foreman's wife, mother of 3, skilled seamstress and respected member of the community. Sometimes months would go by without anyone even mentioning her injury, and when new people came to town and asked about it, the old-timers would simply say she had been in a fire as a girl and leave it at that. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the Morrison family threw a party at the main ranch house. Nearly everyone from the ranch and surrounding area attended, and Brenna found herself surrounded by friends and well-wishers. Caroline Harper was there with her own husband, married the previous year to a banker from Jefferson City. She approached Brenna with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Congratulations on 10 years, Mrs. Keller. You and your husband seem very happy." "We are," Brenna confirmed. "And congratulations on your own marriage." "Thank you. I will admit, when I first heard that Ethan had married you, I did not understand it. But seeing you together over the years, watching how he looks at you, I understand now. He saw something the rest of us missed." It was the closest thing to an apology Brenna was likely to get, and she accepted it gracefully. Sometimes the right person helps us see ourselves more clearly. As the party continued around them, Ethan found Brenna on the porch where she had escaped for a moment of quiet. "There you are. People are asking for you inside. I just needed a moment. It is overwhelming sometimes being the center of attention. You have earned it. 10 years, Brenna. A decade of marriage, 3 children, and a life we built from nothing." Ethan pulled her close. "I meant every word I said in my vows. I have loved you every single day, and I will love you for every day we have left. Even when I am old and gray," Brenna teased. "Especially then. We will grow old together, and it will be an adventure." Ethan kissed her softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on a shot-up cowboy who showed up on your doorstep. Best decision either of us ever made." Inside the house, Their children were playing with the other ranch children, their laughter ringing out over the music and conversation. This was their community, Brenna thought. These were their people. She had spent so many years isolated, convinced that her scar made her unfit for normal life. Ethan had not just proven her wrong about his feelings, he had proven her wrong about everything. She was capable of love and friendship, of being part of something larger than herself. The years continued their steady march. Samuel turned 12, then 13, already showing signs of the man he would become. He wanted to be a rancher like his father, and Ethan began teaching him the business side of things as well as the practical skills. Emma discovered a love of reading and convinced her parents to order books from back east, devouring every story she could find. Thomas's drawings became more sophisticated, capturing the life of the ranch with surprising skill for one so young. Brenna turned 35, then 40. Her face acquired fine lines around her eyes and mouth, and threads of silver appeared in her dark hair. The scar remained, as it always would, but now it was just one feature among many that told the story of her life. She caught her reflection in windows sometimes, and saw not a disfigured woman but a wife and mother, a person who had lived and loved and built something meaningful. Ethan aged as well, his dark hair silvering at the temples and his face weathering from years of outdoor work. But his green eyes remained as clear as ever, and when he looked at Brenna, she still saw the same love that had been there from the very beginning. When Samuel was 17, Morrison offered to sell Ethan a parcel of ranch land at a reasonable price. It was 500 acres of good grazing land with water access, enough to start their own operation. They had saved carefully over the years, building their small cattle herd and putting away every spare dollar. Combined with a loan from the bank, they could just afford it. "It is risky," Ethan said as they discussed it late one night after the children were asleep. "If we fail, we could lose everything. But if we succeed, we will have something to pass on to the children, our own legacy." Brenna took his hand. "We have built everything else together. We can build this too." They purchased the land in the spring of 1885, 13 years after they married. The entire family worked to build a new house on the property, larger than the foreman's house had been, with room for their growing children and the grandchildren they hoped would someday come. Samuel proved invaluable, working alongside his father from dawn to dusk. Emma helped her mother with the interior work, and Thomas sketched plans and suggestions that often improved their designs. The Keller Ranch officially opened in the fall of 1885. It was small compared to operations like the Morrison spread, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and their own sweat. They branded their cattle with a simple K mark and hired 2 young ranch hands to help with the work. The first year was hard. They dealt with drought, predators, and cattle that seemed determined to destroy every fence they built. But they persevered, drawing on the same stubbornness and determination that had brought them together in the first place. By the second year, they were turning a small profit. By the third, they were expanding their herd. Samuel married at 20, a sensible young woman named Margaret who was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. They built a small house on the Keller land, and Samuel took on more responsibility for the day-to-day operations. Brenna gained her first grandchild a year later, a granddaughter named Grace, who had her grandmother's serious dark eyes. Emma shocked everyone by announcing at 18 that she wanted to attend a women's college back east. Brenna and Ethan had saved money for such possibilities, and they sent their daughter off with their blessing, even as they missed her terribly. Emma wrote long letters describing her studies and her new experiences, and she came home every summer, full of ideas and enthusiasm. Thomas remained on the ranch, content to work alongside his father and brother while pursuing his art in his spare time. His drawings began to sell in St. Louis proper, romantic depictions of Western life that wealthy Easterners found fascinating. The extra income helped the ranch through lean times, and Thomas seemed content with his quiet life. As Brenna and Ethan entered their 50s, they found themselves with time to simply enjoy each other again. The hard years of raising children and building the ranch had passed, leaving them with a comfortable routine and the luxury of leisure. They still rode out to the river on warm evenings, still sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land. "Do you remember when I first told you I loved you?" Ethan asked one evening, his arm around Brenna's shoulders. "By the river during our courtship, I remember thinking you were insane, that it was too soon, too fast, too impossible. And now I know you were right. You knew your own heart, even when I did not trust mine." Brenna leaned into him. "You spent every day proving me wrong about myself, not just in those early weeks, but for years. Every time I doubted, every time I was afraid, you were there showing me that I was worth loving. It was never hard. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple, right over the edge of her scar. "Though I will admit to enjoying proving you wrong, you were beautifully, wonderfully wrong." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, two people who had built a life from nothing but love and determination. The ranch spread out around them, tangible proof of what they had accomplished together. In the distance, they could see the lights from Samuel's house where their grandchildren were probably getting ready for bed. Thomas was in the barn, caring for the evening chores, and somewhere back east, Emma was studying for her exams, preparing for a future that would be entirely her own. "We did good," Brenna said softly. "With the ranch, with the children, with everything. We did better than good. We did amazing." Ethan squeezed her shoulder. "And we are not done yet. I figure we have at least another 20 or 30 years to keep proving people wrong and building our legacy." Brenna laughed. "Always the optimist. Always truthful. I told you once that I would love you until the day I died. That has not changed. Will never change." As the years continued to unfold, the Keller Ranch became one of the most respected operations in the county. Their cattle were known for quality, and their reputation for fair dealing brought them steady business. Samuel took over more of the daily management, allowing Ethan to step back slightly, though he could never quite give up working with the horses. Emma returned from college with a teaching degree and opened a small school on the edge of St. Louis proper, educating the children of ranchers and townspeople alike. She never married, finding fulfillment in her work and her independence. Brenna was proud of her daughter's choices, even if they were unconventional. Thomas married at 28, a quiet woman named Ruth, who shared his artistic temperament. They had 2 children and continued to live on the ranch, Thomas splitting his time between ranch work and his increasingly successful artistic career. More grandchildren came, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Brenna found that she loved being a grandmother even more than she had loved being a mother. She could spoil the children and then return them to their parents, could share her hard-won wisdom without the daily worry of raising them. Ethan was the same, patient with endless questions and always ready with stories from the old days. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now 3 generations of Kellers, from Brenna and Ethan down to their youngest grandchild, a baby boy named after his grandfather. The house was full to bursting with people, and the noise was tremendous. During a rare quiet moment, Samuel found his parents on the porch. He was 32 now, a man in his prime with a family of his own. "I wanted to thank you both," he said, for everything you have built here, for giving us a foundation to build our own lives on." "You do not need to thank us," Ethan said. "We did what parents do. We provided and we loved you. The rest was up to you. Still, I am grateful, and I am proud to be your son, both of you." Samuel looked at his mother. "I remember when I was little, other kids used to ask about your scar. I never understood why they cared. To me, you were just mother. Beautiful and strong and everything a mother should be." Brenna's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Samuel. That means more than you know." After Samuel returned to the party, Brenna and Ethan remained on the porch, holding hands and watching their family through the windows. This was what they had built together, Brenna thought. Not just the ranch or the house or the material success, but this family, these connections, this legacy of love. "You were convinced no man could want you," Ethan said softly, echoing the words that had been between them from the very beginning. "Do you still believe that?" "No. You proved me beautifully wrong. Every single day for 25 years you have proven me wrong." Brenna turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "You saw me when I could not see myself. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. And you built this life with me, brick by brick, day by day. I could not have asked for a better partner, a better husband, a better father for my children. And I could not have asked for a better wife. You gave me a home, Brenna. You gave me a purpose. You gave me everything that matters." Ethan pulled her close, and they swayed together on the porch, the music and laughter from inside providing a soundtrack to their moment. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. They weathered droughts and hard winters, economic downturns and personal losses. But through it all, Brenna and Ethan remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through every difficulty and celebrating every triumph together. When Ethan turned 60, he finally stepped back from active ranch management, turning full control over to Samuel. He claimed retirement, though he still spent most days working with the horses or repairing fences. Brenna, too, reduced her sewing work, taking on only the occasional special project that interested her. They had more time for each other than they had enjoyed in years. They took long rides across their land, visited their children and grandchildren, and simply sat together talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes, on particularly warm evenings, they rode out to the river where Ethan had first told Brenna he loved her, and they remembered those early days when everything had seemed so uncertain. "If you could go back," Ethan asked during one such visit, "and tell your younger self anything, what would it be?" Brenna thought about the frightened woman she had been, convinced of her own unworthiness, isolated and lonely. "I would tell her to trust, to take the risk. That the scariest thing she could do would turn out to be the best thing. And I would tell her that she is beautiful, truly beautiful, even if she cannot see it yet. And if you could tell my younger self anything, I would tell him thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for spending every day proving that love does not require perfection, just honesty and commitment and showing up." They were both in their late 60s when Ethan's health began to decline. He developed a persistent cough that would not go away, and the doctor diagnosed inflammation of the lungs. The treatment options were limited, and Ethan grew progressively weaker over the following months. Brenna nursed him with the same skill she had shown when caring for his gunshot wound 40 years earlier. She sat by his bed reading to him, telling him stories, reminding him of their shared memories. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, filling the house with love and making sure Ethan knew how much he was appreciated. On a warm evening in June, remarkably similar to the night when they first met, Ethan called Brenna to his bedside. His breathing was labored, but his mind remained clear. "Come, sit with me." Brenna settled beside him on the bed, taking his hand in hers. Even weakened by illness, his grip was firm. "I am here." "I need you to know something," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Every single day of these 40 years has been a gift. I have never regretted a moment, never wished for a different life. You made me the luckiest man in the world, Brenna Keller." "I am the lucky one," Brenna said through her tears. "You gave me everything. Love, family, purpose, proof that I was worthy of all those things. I would have been lost without you. You would have found your way. You are the strongest person I have ever known." Ethan brought her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers. "Promise me you will be all right. That you will keep living fully, keep enjoying the life we built." "I promise. But you need to promise me something too, anything. Promise me you will wait for me, that when my time comes, you will be there to meet me. I do not want to spend eternity without you." "I will wait," Ethan promised. "For as long as it takes, I will wait." He died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family, his hand clasped in Brenna's. The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over the county to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. Brenna stood beside his grave with dry eyes, knowing that Ethan would not want her to fall apart. He would want her to be strong, to honor his memory by continuing to live well. The months after Ethan's death were the hardest Brenna had ever endured. The house felt empty without his presence, and she found herself turning to speak to him only to remember that he was gone. Her children worried about her, and Samuel suggested she might want to move in with him and Margaret, but Brenna refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "Your father and I built it together. I am not leaving it." Slowly, she found her way through the grief. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them to sew and telling them stories about their grandfather. She worked in her garden, finding peace in the rhythm of planting and harvesting. And every evening, she sat on the porch where she and Ethan had spent so many hours together, feeling his presence in the familiar spaces. One afternoon, she found Thomas in the barn working on a large canvas. When she asked what he was painting, he turned it around to show her. It was a portrait of Brenna and Ethan, painted from memory and photographs, showing them as they had been in their prime. Ethan's arm was around Brenna's shoulders, and both of them were smiling. "I wanted to capture how he looked at you," Thomas explained. "That expression of complete devotion. Everyone who knew Father knew how much he loved you." Brenna studied the painting, seeing herself through Thomas's eyes. In the portrait, her scar was visible but not the focus. Instead, Thomas had captured the love and happiness that had defined her marriage, the partnership that had sustained her for 40 years. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Thomas." Brenna lived for another 8 years after Ethan's death, seeing 2 more great-grandchildren born and watching her family continue to grow and prosper. The Keller Ranch remained strong under Samuel's management, and Emma's school became a respected institution in the county. Thomas's art gained recognition beyond Missouri, and he was commissioned to paint scenes for wealthy patrons across the country. On a soft evening in early summer, 71-year-old Brenna Keller sat on her porch watching the sun set over the land she and Ethan had built their life on. She felt tired, bone-deep tired in a way that told her time was running short. But she also felt content, satisfied with the life she had lived and the legacy she was leaving behind. That night, she went to bed in the room she had shared with Ethan, looking at the portrait Thomas had painted that hung on the opposite wall. She thought about the frightened young woman who had opened her door to a wounded cowboy 48 years ago, never imagining that the choice would define the rest of her life. She fell asleep peacefully, and when her daughter-in-law found her the next morning, there was a smile on her face. At the funeral, surrounded by 4 generations of the family she and Ethan had created. Samuel read from a letter his father had written shortly before his death. It had been given to him with instructions to read it at his mother's funeral when the time came. "To my beloved Brenna," the letter began. "By the time these words are read, we will be together again, and you will know that I kept my promise to wait for you. But I wanted your children and grandchildren to understand what you meant to me and what we built together. When I first saw you, I saw a woman who had been marked by tragedy but not broken by it. I saw strength and kindness and a gentle spirit that the world had tried to crush, but could not. I saw beauty that had nothing to do with the arrangement of features and everything to do with the soul within. I fell in love with you in days and have never stopped loving you for a single moment in all the years since. You were convinced no man could want you, and I spent every day of our marriage proving you beautifully wrong. It was the easiest task I have ever undertaken, because loving you was as natural as breathing. You gave me 3 remarkable children, a home that was a true haven, and a partnership that made every hardship bearable and every joy sweeter. To our family, honor your mother and grandmother by living as she did, with courage and kindness and an open heart. Remember that love sees past surface imperfections to the truth beneath. Remember that the strongest foundations are built on honesty and commitment and showing up every single day. And Brenna, my love, my wife, my heart, thank you for taking a chance on a wounded cowboy, for building this life with me, for every sunrise we watched together and every evening we spent on our porch, for 40 years of devotion and partnership and love that never wavered. You were my everything, and I will wait for you as long as it takes. All my love forever, Ethan." There was not a dry eye in the church as Samuel finished reading. The letter was proof, if any were needed, of the profound connection that had defined Brenna and Ethan's marriage. They laid Brenna to rest beside her husband, and on the shared headstone, Samuel had carved a simple inscription, "Together always." The Keller ranch continued to prosper, passed down through generations who carried forward the legacy of hard work and devotion that Brenna and Ethan had established. The story of their meeting and courtship became family legend, told to each new generation as an example of what love should look like. The portrait Thomas had painted hung in the main house, a reminder of the foundation on which everything else had been built. And sometimes, on soft summer evenings, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old house, close together, watching the sun set over the land they had loved. Whether it was truly the spirits of Brenna and Ethan or simply a trick of the light, no one could say for certain. But the image brought comfort to those who saw it, a reminder that true love does not end with death, but continues on, eternal and unchanging, proving beautifully and forever that some bonds can never be broken.